For Melody, Atlanta was not just a new city, but a symbol of a new beginning. He promised himself that no one else would determine his identity anymore. She was no longer just Martell's wife, but MelodyShari, a mother, a businesswoman, and a living example that people who are broken can be put back together. In this new city, he set small goals for himself: a good school for the children, his own business office, and a quiet life where the sound of peace prevailed over the noise. But in some corner of the heart, the memories of the past were still there. Sometimes in the stillness of the night, sometimes in a sudden memory, Martell's face would come before the eyes. Time reminded that even the new initiates had to face their old sorrows. His time in Huntsville still felt like a burden on his heart. That city where Melody and Martell Holt were once seen as a power couple was now just a memory of sorrow and betrayal. Melody recalled that when she first admitted the truth, it was a silent storm. He said, "I heard the voice of God," he said, "Go." And at that moment, he decided to free himself. But freedom is not always easy for Martell. The separation was not just a marital separation, but a blow to his ego, his career, and his identity. The man who considered himself to be the epitome of success is now portrayed as a villain on TV screens. Melody knew she would get through this battle not just as a woman, but as a mother, a public figure, and a human being. His words would be twisted and twisted in the churches of the media, and every truth would become part of the discussion of lies in Atlanta. Melody begins the process of putting her life back together. Days passed, children went to school, she made her business plan, and returned home in the evening with a tired but determined smile. But life was still a test. Every time a new legal notice came from the court or from Martell, he felt the same old burden on his heart. She wanted her children to stay away from it all, but was not ready to let the past haunt her. One day she was sitting in the park with her children. The sun was soft, the children were laughing, and the moment was peaceful. Just then, a notification came on his phone. Custody review notice. For a moment, his hands trembled. But then he looked at the children, their laughter bringing courage to his heart. "I will not break now," she said to herself. She knew that now this battle was not only of court, but of self-belief. Returning home, he made a cup of tea, placed his lawyer's papers on the table, and made a resolution in his heart. Instead of running away from the past, she will now face it. Late at night, he opened his diary and wrote, "I have lost everything and found myself. Perhaps this is my new beginning with the old shadows." After a few months of living in Atlanta, Melody Holt realized that freedom was a test as well as isolation. Despite the day's busyness, when night fell, she would ask herself, did she really find peace? Or is she just running away from the past and making a new cage? The media was still in pursuit. Sometimes a blogger would publish her pictures. Sometimes a talk show host would comment on her married life. Love, marriage, old clips of Huntsville are brought up again and again, as if people don't want to let her story be forgotten. Melody tried to solidify the foundation for the new chapter of her life. She attended a business networking event where she met other influential women in Atlanta. There he meets Sabria James, a strong, independent businesswoman who at one point has experienced her husband's infidelity and financial woes. Life gives us two options. Either we remain prisoners of the past or we build our own new palace, Sabria told Melody. This sentence went to Melody's heart. She decided that now she would recognize her strength instead of pretending to be weak. But on the other hand, Martell Holt's anger was still not over. He would sit in Huntsville watching Melody's successes on social media, and a poisonous jealousy would rise in his heart. There was a bitterness in each of his interviews. He began to portray himself as the victim, as if Melody had taken his family away from him. When she said on a podcast that "I just want to be close to my kids, but she's pushing me away," public opinion was again divided. Some called Melody a cruel mother, while others stood by her. It was then that Melody realized that being famous is sometimes a burden rather than a blessing. His every word, every post was misconstrued. Nevertheless, he made silence his weapon. "Some wars are won by staying silent," she used to say. But Martell mistook silence for weakness. She again filed a child custody case in court. When Melody's lawyer, Angela Mason, gave her the notice, her eyes flashed with disappointment for a few moments. "I just wanted peace, Angela. Why doesn't he believe we're over? Some men don't give up because they see a woman's freedom as their defeat." Angela calmly replied. This sentence echoed in Melody's heart. The court date was approaching. The media noise was increasing. The feud between Melody and Martell made headlines on platforms like TMZ, Essence, and Urban Belle magazine. One day, as Melody dropped her children off at school, a reporter outside the gate asked, "Do you want to keep Martell away from the children?" The question tore at Melody's heart, but she simply said with a smile, "I want my children to be in peace, that's the truth." When the court day came, there was a media crowd outside the Atlanta County Courthouse. Cameras were flashing, people were shouting, hashtags were on social media. The conflict between Melody and Martell was in the headlines on such platforms. One day, as Melody dropped her children off at school, a reporter outside the gate asked, "Do you want to keep Martell away from the children?" The question tore at Melody's heart, but she simply said with a smile, "I want my children to be in peace, that's the truth." When the court day came, there was a media crowd outside the Atlanta County Courthouse. Cameras were flashing, people were shouting, and hashtags were trending on social media. Melody, dressed in white, entered the courthouse in a dignified manner. His face was calm, but the same determination in his eyes. "I will fight for my truth." Martell came in with his lawyers, haughty in his demeanor, but his face showing signs of weariness. Inside, Judge Turner begins proceedings. Melody's attorney, Angela, presented evidence that the children have a better environment in Atlanta, that they are happy in school, and that Melody has rebuilt her life in a positive way. On the other hand, Martell's attorney, David Crane, alleged that Melody was keeping the children away from him and influencing them. The judge advised both parties to speak with restraint. At the end of the day, there was no verdict. But Melody knew that the real verdict was not in the court, but in her character. As she walked out of the court, the media's mics moved towards her, but she said nothing. Silence was his answer. Sabria came to his house in the evening. The two sat in silence. Then Melody said softly, "Sometimes winning isn't a decision, it's an intention." Sabria put a hand on her shoulder and said, "And your intentions are pure, Melody. You're rewriting your story." That night, Melody puts her children to bed and looks out the window at the lights of Atlanta. Behind the city lights was darkness, the same darkness she wanted to escape from. But now she knew that the real light burns inside a person. She said to herself, "This darkness is my test, but I will find my own light in it." The days after court were like the end of an exhausting battle for Melody. She wanted it all to be over, but in reality, everything had just begun. The media was still behind him. The comments were still flowing on social media. And Martell was still fueling controversy with his statements. But the difference this time was that Melody had strengthened herself internally. She knew that peace doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. Atlanta mornings now became a message of a new beginning for him. Every day she would return from dropping the children off at school, start work in her office, and solidify the foundation of her new life. She reorganized her 7th Avenue beauty brand. "I'm not rebuilding my life. I'm recreating it," she often says in interviews. This phrase was no longer just words, but had become his reality. Relations with Martell were now limited to legal limits. They kept in touch about the children, but Melody maintained an emotional distance. She knew that stepping into pain again was tantamount to punishing herself. Sometimes when she listened to Martell's video call on her son's phone, a small smile would cross her face, no longer bitterness, but a silent acceptance. Meanwhile, Melody forms the basis of a new friendship. She met some inspiring women in Atlanta's business community, women who held their own despite divorce, financial loss, and social criticism. It was these meetings that gave Melody the idea of Rebuild Project K, a platform where she could teach other women how to rebuild life after defeat. The project soon gained popularity. Local media dubbed him Atlanta's Rising Phoenix. On the other hand, Martell's life was now sinking into silence. He would try to make himself look better, but inside, he was crumbling. His business ventures were failing, relationships were strained, and people no longer trusted him. One day he sent a message to Melody. "I never meant to hurt you. I was just afraid of losing my place." Melody read the message, was silent for a moment, and then hung up. Some things don't deserve an answer. A few weeks later, Melody got a big chance. Essence magazine selected her as most influential women of the South. In the interview, she said, "I have not come to erase my past. I have come to learn from it." Those words were not just for her, but became hope. Just for her, but became hope. For thousands of women who were trying to piece together the broken pieces of their lives. But with success came a new test. A reality show producer approached her and love offered. A contradiction arose in Melody's heart. She knew that the opportunity could boost her fame, but there was also the reality that the cameras could rehash her wounds. He consulted Sabria, who said, "If you tell your own story, the world won't tell it from someone else's point of view." This sentence touched his heart. Following week, Melody signed a show contract. But this time with one condition: she would show the truth of her life, not drama. "I want to show women that it is possible to rebuild after the destruction of life," she said. When the first promo of the show was released, Melody Rizag started trending on social media. People began to admire his strength, his patience, and his new journey. Martell saw all this, but now he was silent. Perhaps he finally realizes that Melody's peace is not his defeat, but his own salvation. One day he said to the children, "Your mother is very brave." The words reached Melody, and for the first time she felt sympathy for Martell instead of hatred. Tonight, as she sat on the balcony drinking tea, the lights of Atlanta spread out before her. There was a quiet calm in the air. He looked up at the sky and said softly, "Finally, the storm has passed." Time passed, and Melody's life took a new turn. Her show Love Legacy Atlanta chapter was not only successful, but also set a new standard in the world of reality TV. The show was not like a typical glamour series. It was based on the real stories of women, their pain, success, and self-discovery. In each episode, Melody meets a new woman, hears her experiences, and shows how even life's wounds can be a source of strength. This truth began to impress the audience. They began to see Melody as a leader, not just a reality star anymore. Melody was silent for a few moments when she saw the video. He heard Martell's words as realization rather than accusation. She knew that was the hardest lesson in life: to forgive others, whether they ask for forgiveness or not. "I have conquered my past," she said to herself. "Now I will live only in the present." That night, he went to his children's rooms and looked at them lovingly. That was his real pride, his children, his ambition, the living proof of his success. Meanwhile, Melody's show won a new award, Best Inspirational Reality Series of the Year. His speech in that event touched everyone's hearts. She said, "Truth always brings light, no matter how late it comes. I dedicate this award to all the women who lost themselves in darkness, but braved and found their light back." The hall erupted with audience standing applause. Melody also set a new direction. He decided to expand his Rebuild Project K nationwide. It was no longer limited to workshops, but had become a foundation that provided financial, legal, and psychological support. He used the popularity of his show for a positive purpose. Millions of women on social media were inspired by her, started sharing their stories. Martell secretly made a large donation to the foundation. When Melody found out, she just smiled and said, "Sometimes a man changes when he realizes the meaning of his loss." One day, both met at a charity event. For the first time in years, there was neither bitterness nor blame in his eyes. There was only silent respect. "I'm glad you found your light," Martell said. "Maybe you do too," replied Melody. And there was a silence between the two that speaks louder than words. At the end of the night, Melody was standing on the balcony looking at the sky. Every fight, every wound, every victory of his life was reflected in his mind. "Finally, the truth has illuminated everything," he said to himself. Time had healed the wounds of both, But for Melody, it was not just the end, but the beginning. He lived his life so intensely that every experience now became a lesson. Her success, her peace, and her truth were no longer limited to her alone. She had become the story of thousands of women who wanted to rise again from the rubble of their lives. Melody was now the head of the Rebuild Project K Foundation. Under her management, hundreds of workshops and conferences were held across the country where women, mothers, and young girls told their stories and dreamed of a new life. A new motto emerged under his leadership: "Your destruction is not your identity. Your rise again is your success." One day at the foundation's annual event, Melody came on stage and said, "I'm not the Melody who lived in someone's shadow. I'm the Melody who got a new shape from her breakup. I changed my story, and today I want you to write your own story. Because if we leave the pen of our lives in the hands of others, they will always portray our character in the wrong color." The audience stood up. There was moisture in every eye, but strength had awakened in every heart. Martell was also present at the event. Now he had become a silent listener. He saw Melody on stage and thought to himself that maybe it was all meant to be. He told a friend, "Some people in life don't come for us, but to show us a mirror. Melody showed me who I wasn't and who I could be." There was peace in his eyes for the first time. Peace had replaced remorse a few months later. Melody was nominated for an international award, Women of Impact Global Honors. His speech was touching. He said, "I am the woman you all saw crying. But today I am smiling for all those who are still searching for the light within. Remember, your past does not make you weak. It makes you great. If I can rise again, so can you." Martell now spent more time with the children. He was trying to be a better father. One day she said to her daughter, "When you grow up, be brave like your mother. And remember, never let anyone judge you." His daughter replied, "Dad, now you too have changed." And at that moment, Martell's face had the same light that Melody had once seen on her face. Some stories never end, they live. Breathe and lead the way for new generations. Melody and Martell's story was no longer just a reality show, but a life lesson. The lesson that truth never perishes, only shines late. If you're reading this story, remember your story is just as valuable. Raise your voice, make your wounds strength, not weakness. And if you've ever doubted yourself, decide today you are the hero of your own story, not the character of someone else's quote. Share this story with anyone who wants to believe that resurrection is possible, because the light of truth always shows the way. Truth always shows the way.